It's the heart of the home, the kitchen. Here, the recipes are referenced, pots are stirred, and stories are shared. This is also the place where Corinne Cook made a name for herself. Other names Corinne went by over the years were sister, baby sister, Aunt Sis, and then Coco to her grandkids. Regardless of what you call Corinne, her life was not unlike a cherished family recipe passed down through the generations. A life nourished with her faith, mixed with lots of love, sprinkled with a bit of spice, and of course garnished with humor. Bon appetit.
I was 23 and Tommy was almost 24 when we married. That was kind of old because a lot of my friends that were 15 and 16 and 17, they'd marry right out of high school. I feel like, we had a lot of time. Back then, you dated a lot. Like, you didn't date. If you went out with somebody more than once, you just dated anybody you wanted to, back in those days. It wasn't till you were really serious that you only had one person. And then you got an engagement ring, usually about that time. But no, in high school, we didn't date too much. But in college, we dated a lot of different boys.
Well, I know a lot of people want to know this, Corinne. There's been a lot of men in and out of your life throughout Who was your first little boyfriend way back when? And I jest about a lot of men.
I shouldn't even tell you this. It was, I had, Willie Harmon was, I guess, my first date. But we had a young coach that moved to Church Point, and my grandma had a rooming house or a boarding house. And the coach moved in there. Well, suddenly I want to be at my grandma's all the time.
Was it Coach Cephalo, as I read?
No, this Coach Cephalo was another coach that lived in a rental house we had. But no, this was Coach. Don't tell me now I can't remember his name.
But that was your first little crush?
And of course, he was 4 years older than us. So that just seemed so old back then. Well, Coach Roberts. Yeah, I had the biggest, we all did. He was cute, and, he wasn't that much older than us, but he would chaperone we had a lot of dances at the youth center, or if it was really something nice, sometimes our parents would drive us to Opelousas, or we'd go with the older brothers. Opelousas or Rain to the youth centers, and we jitterbugged and danced the night away, but we're home, I'm sure, by midnight or 11 o'clock. And no drinking at all when we were in high school. And to this day, I just don't like it.
Wasn't a big part of y'all's life. It wasn't any part. No drinking and all that. I've read your biography. You've had definitely an interesting life. It started in Church Point, Louisiana.
Exactly.
What was it like being raised in that part of Louisiana?
Utopia. We skated down Main Street. We had gravel roads when I was little in front of the house. So, we played in the street. It rained. We played in the ditches. I guess we all survived because it was just, Mama cooked every day. Our daddy worked a block away. And it was just a great place to grow up. We knew that if we did anything wrong, Mama heard about it, even though there were they didn't necessarily use telephones. They just stopped and told Mama if we were up to anything. No good. But we didn't. We really basically were, I think, fairly good. I had 5 brothers, and I was the only girl. So, it was just an easy, fun way to grow up.
So you growing up with 5 boys, so you weren't afraid to catch bugs and to get in the ditches and get muddy?
Well, they try to act like I was the princess. Believe me, I was not, Bill. They blamed me, and then we had what we called the back lot from our house, which was just another lot behind our house. and they'd be doing all kind of stuff. And then the minute I'd go screaming to Mama, they'd act like they had never done anything wrong in their life. So I put up with a lot. I was not a princess. So, but, it's just, I think growing up in a small town offers so much,
Growing up like that back then, outside playing with you, it lent itself. I mean, you're used to doing things on your own. I mean, you had to be capable back then. You didn't, and I guess in your life, you're always you were a doer.
Right. And then, Bill, what was so funny, we lived believe me, it was a country town, but we always said we lived in town, and most of our friends lived in the country, because they were, they worked with the crops or farmers or they raised cows. My brothers all loved birds. We had a parrot growing up. Our grandma had a parrot. My brothers raised fantail pigeons, and we had peacocks that would get out of the yard and go down the street honking and driving everybody crazy. But we always had a lot of birds at the house, You
tell me that. And your dad's name was an interesting... And then
his name is Frank LeMoyne Hanley. He was originally from Cottonport. And but we all called him Toonie. So when we were little, Mama would say, well, one of you go call Toonie to come eat. So we all called our daddy Toonie. Everybody in town called him Toonie. But Church Point, everybody had a nickname. I was baby sister or sister. My nieces still call me Aunt Sis. And I'll go to town and half the people will say, oh, baby sister, what you doing in town? Now I'm an old grandma. But it was, and there were just a lot of Skinny Harmon is where we bought our sausage, and Tutu Baru's was a mailman. I mean, and even the phone book, our little phone book was all in, just nicknames.
So, yeah, those were used a lot back then, even in the white communities. Because now, it seems like African Americans all have nicknames, but y'all all had.
No, Church Point had a lot of nicknames.
And so, where did you line up? So, tell me
There was Frank, the oldest, and he's deceased now, and then Michael, my brother with the 12 kids, then me, then Christopher, my brother who's also deceased, and then it was Timothy and Patrick. All had Irish names. My daddy loved Irish names, and most of us all are named after somebody. My grandma, she would talk about she was of Avoyelles Parish, but she never said, I'm from Cottonport. That's in Avoyelles Parish. I'm from Avoyelles Parish. That was like you were from Europe or somewhere fancy. But so most of my brothers have her brothers' names, in their names. And the worst, my poor brother Chris, and he was always kind of quiet, but his name was Christopher Blooms. My grandma's brother was Blooms Lemoyne. He said, how could I be the one to get, that kind of name? But all of us are named with either my mother's siblings or our grandmothers and fathers. So, and we still carrying that down. Of course, I was named Corinne Louise. My grandmother, you'll not believe this, her name was Louisiana. Thank goodness they cut my name short. But so I was Corinne Louise. My aunt is Anna Louise. Shannon Louise, my daughter that you know. Allison Louise, So they still, my kids are still naming everybody a Louise. But it really started off as Louisiana.
I'll be damned. Well, I'm glad they cut that off. Right?
Good Lord, I am too.
So you had 5 brothers.
Uh-huh.
Oh, goodness me. Did you get picked on? I mean,
I thought I did, but they acted like they never did a thing. Yeah. But Frank, the oldest, was our very talented brother who played the piano. He was very artistic. He could just do anything. My brother Michael sang beautifully. My daddy sang, but my daddy had a beautiful voice, and he played the tenor saxophone. Michael, he sang and played, and then Frank could play anything. Christopher sang. I don't remember if he played an instrument, the younger ones, but I had no musical ability. And my poor parents, they tried everything. You know, I tried the piano because our grandma was our piano teacher.
Yeah.
And
Mammy.
And we all had to, you know, Mama, we had a grand piano, and we all had to practice 30 minutes or 45 minutes a day. All I would do was cry the whole time. So Mama said they finally let me quit because I was ruining the piano. And I wasn't any good at it. So I did manage a few recitals. And then I said, well, I think I want the violin. And then I wanted a piano, accordion. I tried everything. I wasn't good at any of it.
Did you pass that on to your kids, that gift of no music?
I think they can sing a little bit. Yeah. And what I think about is so terrible. When I was a teenager, I went to, I can't remember what the camp was. Maybe it was Camp Marydale or something. I was the song leader. I could not sing. I could not carry a tune. In fact, my daddy, I wanted to be in this little operetta we were having at Church Point High School. And Miss Ruby, who was one of the teachers, she was going to direct the thing. And I said, oh, I definitely want to be in it. So we had these tryouts. Well, of course, she knew I wasn't very good at singing. So she said, well, go home and ask Toonie to help you, you know, sing this. So I remember I got home and I told Toonie, I said, oh, I'm in this operetta. And, you know, Miss Ruby said, if you would just help me sing this. Well, I think he tried. And finally he said, well, let's see, can you just hum? I thought, well, I'm going to be in the opera and I have to hum. So anyway, that's what I kind of knew. I couldn't really sing. But it didn't keep me from trying all the time.
And I'm sure you were.
And with my loud voice.
Yes, but I'm sure there's plenty of other gifts you were given as a child, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
But we were big because we were a little country community, big in 4-H, FFA, you know, all the usual things.
Went up to Chicago, huh?
Right, went to Chicago with 4-H.
Yeah, that's a fun trip.
For what they call good grooming back then. But I would enter cherry pie contest, and Mama always was like, you know, she was very active in helping us with baking and cooking and sewing. We all did that. Because, you know, we didn't have much to do when it was summertime. We would play outside and shell pecans. We had a big pecan tree, and Mama baked all the time. So, you know, we'd want to do something, go play ball in the lot down the street. Or she'd say, well, no, you guys have to shell a couple of pecans. So even the friends would come in and they'd say, come on, do we have to shell pecans before we go?
It sounds like such a wholesome place to be.
It was a great place to grow up. Yeah. And, you know, most families, of course, this is going back so long, most families just had one car. And that's what we had, one car. And Toonie, of course, had trucks for the pop factory. Oh, and about the trucks, my daddy he had a beautiful handwriting, and he would paint signs on the local trucks, you know, in this beautiful old script. And
that where Frank got some of his artistic ability?
Oh, I'm sure. And now my brother Michael he has collected a lot of old bottles from our pop factory. It was called Hanley's Bottling Works. And he's collected bottles and the cases, the wooden cases.
But y'all were, your parents liked a big family. Y'all were all Catholic. You were born Catholic?
Born Catholic. And when I tell you, if you decided you weren't going to church, you better be sick because you weren't going anywhere else. you stayed either in your room, or if you were sick enough not to go to church, you stayed in the bed. But anyway, we all dressed up and had these special clothes for going to church.
And so your daddy's Toonie and your mom?
Gertie Mae.
That's why we didn't say it. Gertie Mae. Tell me about Gertie Mae.
Gertie Mae. Mama was a little short woman, full of energy. At 95, she was still walking in her yard and the back lot I was telling you about, picking up sticks, because all of our trees were old, and I guess little twigs and sticks fell all the time. But she was still at 95 picking up sticks. I can't pick up anything.
And you got 11, 12 years to go.
Right, I do have a lot of time to go. Yeah. But Mama was an artist, and she grew brown cotton, and she would, spin it and weave it into different we have a lot of little mats and stuff that she did for us. Mama was interesting.
That's great. So where did the Hanleys come from? Tell me about your grandparents and their heritage and genealogy.
Well, Mimi and Papa was from Brookhaven, Mississippi. And I think they were just men. And one Hanley went to, where was that? Not Cottonport, not Simpsport. I can't remember. Yeah. Down the bayou by Houma, and he was a school principal. They were school teachers. Now, our Papa was a telegrapher, for the railroad. Okay. He came with the railroad because Church Point had a little
depot station.
Yeah. So they do all that little stuff on those little telegraph things, and Mimi taught piano, and she also had a nursery, which meant she just took cuttings of everything, and she made bouquets for weddings. And Mimi liked frou-frou.
That was Toonie's mom and dad, or was that?
Toonie's.
And then tell me about your mom's mom.
Mama's mama was Louisiana Colligan, and I don't know. She died when I was kind of young.
Yeah, you don't remember.
And she was also separated from her husband. Yeah. And back in those days, that was just a no-no. It was never talked about. My mama never. We were old when. Oh, I know. We were skating. I was skating with my friend. I probably was in high school. And we were skating on Main Street, and there were a couple of bars, and they had little benches outside. And I was skating with my cousin, and she said, "You see that man sitting over there in front of that bar?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "That's your grandpa." I said, "I didn't know." And it was just not talked about. I had no idea. He lived with Mama's godmother, but when we would get there, he'd just go back. He lived in a little place outside.
Did you ever have a desire to talk to him?
No. I mean, he went inside. So Michael, my brother, stayed outside, and I think he called Michael over, and he asked Michael, he said, "Do you know who I am?" And Michael said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, who am I?" He said, "You're my grandfather." Michael said, "How do you know?" He said, "My mama told me." But, we had no connection at all with him. I think he was abusive. He wasn't a good man.
When did they come to the United States?
I don't know that.
They came from England? They came from Ireland?
No, from, I think they were from Ireland, but I'm not positive. Another thing, and I think it happened more than once. I only did it once. These small town newspapers would have contests for subscriptions. Like if you would get whoever got the most subscriptions won. I don't think it was a car. But anyway, I decided I wanted to sell subscriptions to the Church Point News and the Rain Tribune. The two papers were both printed, in Rain. So I went around selling, and then my daddy got into it and really wanted me to win. So everybody in town had a subscription or renewed their subscription. But I didn't win the car. I came in second.
But you got a car later on.
I got a car we only got cars when we graduated and had to start a job.
Yeah. And
So
your dad helped you with that Ford Fairline, was it?
Ford
Fairline.
Falcon.
Yeah.
Yes. So he paid the down payment, and I guess I paid for it every month. I don't even remember. It's been so long ago. But I went to work for Gulf States Utilities as a home service advisor. We would meet with people and help them plan all electric kitchens. And I had a company car, so I didn't have to use my fancy little Ford Falcon. And then once we started having babies, we always, and I know your parents too, we always had station wagons. Of course, no restraining, kids flopping around, and we'd put all the seats down, and that was a big playpen.
Yes.
So
At 60 miles an hour, 75. No.
I can remember going to Church Point all the time and throw the kids in the back of the station wagon, and they'd get fighting back there. And I'd say, one more time I hear anything, I'm going to go back there and spank all of you. Well, I mean, they just kept on fighting and fighting. So finally I pulled off, and I can remember kind of leaning in there, but they would all run to the front of the car. I said, now if you saw a woman get out, open the back of a station wagon, try to swat your kids, they'd haul you straight to jail. But no, they would just be fighting back there and screaming at one another.
I am sure.
So
I am sure.
anyway, but you were raised kind of like me. Your parents did a lot of fun things, but you knew the limits.
That's right.
So
We found out the limits.
even though you weren't on the side of the highway.
We probably were in a wagon. You know what I find interesting is that Lady Pat from Jennings, I believe Rosemarie was what?
Kaplan.
And a lot of your good friends, maybe not Kate.
We're country
We're
towns.
country out in southwest Louisiana. Y'all just gravitated toward each other.
Well, I guess. I mean, it was, and like I think I had a friend that went off to nursing school in New Orleans. I went to UL. A couple of the girls, I think, went to business school and maybe moved to Lafayette. But a lot of the girls, got married right out of high school and, of course, didn't go to college, but have been very successful.
Yeah, no, that education was big. And you and Tommy, y'all went to college. Did most of your siblings go to college? And
Yeah, we
finished high
all
school?
did.
Yeah.
And then Frank had his master's in music from Florida State. Michael never finished. I finished in home economics. Christopher finished in psychology, maybe. I don't remember what. But he went to the Navy. Well, that was when Vietnam was all starting. So he went into the Navy. My brother Tim was in the Navy. Pat, I think he was in between when they didn't. And my brother Michael was a Marine. Okay. So they all...
two of them saw Vietnam, or three of them went to Vietnam?
Two. Yeah.
Wow.
Michael, that was when the Marines were just so rough. And Tommy, my husband, was in the Air Force, but he worked in a hospital, even though Tommy didn't think he wanted to be a doctor, but he was always in a hospital, and there were always the women, that were in the military, and he, they would do D&Cs and hysterectomies, and when Tommy came to Keesler Field in Biloxi, Michael said, good Lord, did you just get some new shoes? And Tommy said, no, I've been having these the whole 3 years. He said, I've worn out 3 pair of brogans, in the Marines. They were so much rougher than Tommy being in the hospital working.
In the Air Force,
a D&C, just as a scrub or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael said back in those days the Marines were rough.
Yeah. And Michael's the one that had that elaborate home in Lafayette. Is that right?
No, that's Frank.
Frank. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And Frank was a piano major, but he also did fabulous miniature ceramics, and he has pieces in the museums, especially in LA. He has a lot of stuff there.
I had always heard about Frank's house and all of
It was gorgeous.
Yes.
Yeah. They really were talented.
Yeah. So after Church Point High, is that was the name of it?
I went to the convent.
Yeah.
It went up to, I guess, the 6th, maybe the 8th grade. And then we had to go to Church Point High School. Had great teachers. Probably some of them were not college graduates, but wonderful teachers. And
It was a public school?
public school.
And it was mostly probably white kids back then, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And even our church, we had the white church, and then Father Barnett, who was a big family friend, had the black church. And they had their schools. You know, now they're, of course, totally integrated.
Yes.
But, yeah, Church Point High School was fun, too.
And what made you go to UL? What was it called?
I didn't know there was any other choice.
What was it called back then? Louisiana Institute?
It was, no, when I went, yeah, it was called SLI, Southwest Louisiana Institute. Then it was Southwestern University, and then ULL. It's changed names a whole bunch of times. But even back then, we pretty much knew enough to nod and tell people hello. And I joined a sorority. I knew nothing about sororities because Mama went to Grand Coteau. They called it Grand Coteau Normal School. It was what you went to if you were going to be a teacher. I don't know what normal school means. But Mama was going to teach. I think she only taught a couple of years and then was pregnant. And and she taught, I think, at Church Point High School. Mr. Lugar was our principal, and he was so rough. And, I mean, we were scared to death to ever do anything wrong. And nobody did bad things back then. You know, what we thought was bad was Halloween. We'd all be in a group, and we'd go stack people's patio furniture, or it was silly stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't do bad, real bad stuff. Anyway, it was just a great place to live.
Yeah.
But I do like life. I love Lafayette, and I do love Baton Rouge and raising my kids here.
Yeah.
So it's been just a good life.
Yeah, I know it has. When did you meet? You were at ULI or whatever?
USL.
USL when you met Tommy?
Yeah. He was going to ask my roommate for a date. And he didn't, and he asked me. And I think he did it on the back of, we used checks for everything, and if we didn't have a check, we'd just get a piece of paper and make what they called a counter check. And we'd just do Church Point Bank and Trust, pay to the order of Borden's, sign my name. Because I think our daddy never gave us an allowance, but we never spent but about $5 or $10. And we had meal tickets, so you went, and we wanted to go to the cafeteria because that's where you met the boys.
That's right.
So, but anyway, I just remember it was the back of a check. It used to have a little piece of cardboard in the back. Probably still does. And Tommy on that wrote, "Would you like to go to Borden's with me Friday night?" or something. I think I still have that. So our first date was to Borden's. And then he had a girlfriend here. So it was a long time before we really kind of went steady. Yeah. But once we started dating, we just never quit. Yeah. He was a good daddy. Yeah. And a fun daddy.
Yeah, no, I know he was fun. What was it about him at that young age? Was he fun back then? I'm sure
he was crazy fun. Yes. Because a lot of the I mean, Tommy just liked having a good time and laughing and making people happy. So
There was a lot to like about it.
He had a good life and loved life.
Yeah.
Loved his children. He never saw a difference in people. Tommy could just be best friends with the old shrimpers, with no teeth or whatever down there, as he would with the biggest insurance executive he knew. I mean, there was no difference to him. Yeah. They were just his friends.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, he definitely had a quality about him that was attractive.
He did like people and loved his kids.
And y'all were married what year?
61.
61?
Yeah. So, and then Tommy died when he was 56. 56? Which is now just seems so young. Yes. But Tommy also died the day before we were supposed to have our first grandchild. And Julie, I was pregnant for Julie the day I found out I was pregnant for Julie. The day I was, 37. And back then, that was kind of old to be pregnant. But anyway, so Tommy could not wait to have a grandkid. And I could have waited, a little bit. Shannon had given him a picture of where did they get those x-rays? Sonogram. Yeah. So, Shannon had given him one of those, and he carried it in his pocket. And because his buddies that he played racquetball with were older. A few years older than he was. And they were having grandkids. So he was so excited to know he was going to have a grandkid. He would carry that sonogram in his pocket. And one day, Fred Fry said, "Look at this, I'm going to have a grandbaby." Tommy said, "I am too, look at mine." I said, "Tommy, yours look like E.T. I mean, those sonograms are so bad. Back then, they were so bad. But he died on the racquetball court, playing. Yes. But Tommy had one of those bag phones, and that's how they...
And that's how they called the ambulance with the bag phone?
Yeah. And you remember the bag phones? The phone was as big as a real phone that you used on the hook. Right. It was such a big... But Tommy loved gadgets. So, loved phones. I remember when Home Depot opened, he was in hog's heaven. It was like his playhouse. Because Tommy sometimes would get up real, real early. I always liked to sleep late. And he would get up and go to Home Depot and just go up and down those aisles. Very happy to just be in there with all the stuff.
When did you realize that after y'all were married that he was an early riser and a go-get?
From the get-go. He would get up with little Tommy, change the first diaper, get the bottle ready, and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, he said, because he woke up happy, he said, "I woke up with like a stomach ache." So anyway, he just liked mornings. And I was looking forward to getting old because I thought maybe I would too someday. Yeah. I still don't. Yeah. So I still like to sleep late. I stay up late. Yes. So I've just had my clock run in a different way.
Amen. Your
whole
life.
My life.
That's fine. That's who you are.
Yes. So
your kids know it, and the grandkids don't call. What do they call you?
Coco.
They'll call Coco before what? 9, 8?
Exactly. They know. My clock goes off at 8:30 because I'm supposed to take a medicine. But half the time I just push it down and sleep just a little bit longer. Yeah. But I used to love to sew. And once my kids would go to bed, I'd start cutting out a dress at 10 o'clock at night and sew till 1 o'clock in the morning. I could wear my dress the next day. Back then, and your mama too, we would put our kids to bed and we'd go to the store. There was a place called the Fair over here that had everything. We'd go to the Fair and to Kent's. And so, once our kids were sleeping, we'd go shopping.
You could get productive, right?
Exactly.
It's funny that y'all were doing
And
that.
now,
Yeah. Not anymore.
But now you just don't. It's not. I don't know. Things were just so different when we were young and.
Well, how did you get involved with the becoming a food writer, columnist?
Yeah, I finished. I finished in home economics, and like I said, worked for Gulf States. But back in those days, I got pregnant right after we got married. And in those days, if you were 3 months and started showing, you could no longer work. So I don't know how that rule came about, but it's for sure that I had to, quit my job. So I didn't do anything, and then Tommy and I moved here with Hurricane Betsy. He was an insurance adjuster, and Mr. Cook was a retiring general adjuster from General Adjustment Bureau. And so they were going to go independent. And then the Hurricane Betsy happened, so they just did it quicker than they thought they were going to do. And I came here, and Walk and Whisk had opened a little culinary shop, and she knew I was a home ec major. And so she asked if I would teach a couple of cooking courses. So I taught Cajun cooking. And then the YWCO downtown had just moved to a new building, and I taught there. And Pat Baldridge was just getting ready to start the food section. So she asked if I would go on with her and have a column. And I said, well, I can't imagine where I'd get recipes after I run out of my mama's recipes or, And we did recipes with Gulf States. We would put out a little ready kilowatt pamphlet. So, and I could use some of those. But I couldn't imagine how I would manage. But I did it for 42 years.
That's a lot of recipes.
And I did it always in my kitchen. Yeah. So my kids grew up with me doing recipes, and they did recipes. Like I'd say, recipes tomorrow. Shannon would have 2, Allison would have 2, Julie would have 2. Because I would do a bunch of columns or recipes, photograph them at once. Yeah. The photographer would come from the newspaper and photograph. So
that was here in y'all's previous house off Drusilla, right?
It was always, yeah.
Is that where y'all were when y'all got to Baton Rouge off of Drusilla over there?
Uh-huh. Yeah. We did.
Because y'all were married in Lafayette, huh?
Right. Yeah. Well, married in Church Point.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so you kids, do they still cook today? They like cooking?
They all are good cooks. Yes. Tommy, he barbecues and stuff, but he's not crazy about cooking. But Shannon's a wonderful cook. So is Allison, and Julie's a good cook. So, it's just there's something about sitting down at a table to eat that people just don't do anymore. Although my kids, people will ask them, well, how were all the wonderful meals at your mama's? And they can't remember anything I cooked. That was good. But yet when they come, they love it if I just have a country dinner. Roast and rice and gravy. And Christmas and Christmas and Thanksgiving, we have the exact same thing we've had since my first. And every year I'll suggest maybe we change it up, and they'll say, we're doing the same thing. It's the same menu year after year.
Something about tradition, though.
Right. They don't want to leave it. And I don't know if that's because Tommy died so young, and that's how it always was, or if they just want to hang on to all the old stuff.
Was Tommy a good eater? Did he?
Tommy ate, but he didn't like to cook. He would try to barbecue, but it always flamed up, and he just never was crazy about cooking, and never did learn to cook anything on the stove. If I was out of town, I guess he took the kids and went to eat somewhere.
Piccadilly, maybe.
Oh, definitely Piccadilly. Yes. I forget how. That was our only place we ever ate. Yeah. Really, as a family. Mm-hmm. And we thought it was expensive when it was probably, $3 a piece for the kids.
Yeah, the little satellite plate, the little children's plate that we used to.
And the kids got the blue Jell-O they never ate.
That's right.
So,
but it was fun to put on the tray.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny. So did you and Tommy know y'all going to have a decent-sized family?
No, we never thought about it. It just happened. Yeah.
And then how did you, when did they start going to St. George, your kids? Or they went to Westminster?
At first, they all went to, well, Tommy and Shannon went to Westminster. And then that's when things started changing. And then, so Allison and Julie went to the St. George. Yeah.
And that's kind of where y'all met a lot of y'all's friends, huh?
Oh, yeah.
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 That's what Norman was saying. They all, between the fair and the parent teachers and all the...
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you, at Westminster and St. George, y'all started to integrate and just feel like part of the family, right?
Right.
That's where y'all went to church?
Yeah, exactly. And then, back then we were active in, the children's schools.
So Tommy and his dad was in the insurance business too?
Yes.
And so they teamed up, but Tommy's always been an adjuster, and then gravitated toward airplanes, right?
Right. And then Tommy, our son, went to work for us, and then Tommy does strictly aviation now.
So did you and Tommy used to fly a little bit?
Yeah, I was never crazy about it. But I remember one time we were going somewhere, and he said, "You've got to take this wheel and start trying to do something." I said, "Look, you got me up here. You better get me down." So I never was interested in learning how to fly, but Tommy loved it. Tommy went through a thing that at first it was motorhomes. They were just coming out, and he was going to be a rep on the side for some Winnebago or somebody. So we got this Winnebago, went on a trip. Well, I mean, it was just crazy with the kids. It didn't last. And then we did pop-up tent camping. It was a pop-up tent you would pull it behind the car. And it was a little pop-up camper. And at the time, I was tired of cooking. But the minute I would get in that camper, all I wanted to do was cook on that little... So we went to the Smoky Mountains. We went 2 or 3 nice trips. And I look back now at these pictures, and Shannon and Allison are dressed in these precious little dresses, shoes to match. Tommy's in a cute little outfit. It's not like you think about camping today.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know what, but and the kids still talk about the Indians, doing their war dances and stuff at some of those. But we did that, and then we had a camp in Springfield, a little tiny camp that we spent lots of time, at that little bitty thing, and we'd get 10, 15 kids in there. Now you go on a vacation to a camp, you have to have a mansion.
Yes, yeah, especially like at the beach or something like that. They're all nicer than houses.
Oh, for sure. And this little camp, it had never flooded when we bought it. And I think it flooded every year that we had it. And we'd think, well, surely this time we're going to have to knock it down. The tile would go back down because we'd get in there with mops and brooms and, I guess, Clorox and clean the thing. But I'm sure if it was good products, it would have never lasted that long. Like I said, Tommy and, of course, little Tommy were big hunter and fishermen, so that's... And he didn't care what I did because he did, his hunting and fishing. So Trudy Bodman and I would just be antiquing or sewing or going to get fabric or, So I kind of could do what I wanted to do with my friends, too.
Yeah, you and the girls and your friends do your thing, and Tommy.
Yeah, we're like Lady Pat, and then we could take little small trips.
Yeah.
And do whatever we wanted to do.
You've been blessed with some good friends over the years,
Oh,
haven't
my gosh. Cannot imagine without them, what this life would be. especially because I was the one widowed so early, But I remember the day Tommy was buried, your mama, Rosemary, all of them spent the night here. They had a slumber party for me. So we all, and then the next morning, they all came too. But the next morning was when Hanley was born, my first granddaughter. But Hanley was such a blessing to us after Tommy died. And I mean, I just could not imagine how he could die when he was finally going to see this grandbaby the next day. But he died the day she was due. But fortunately, they didn't have to take the baby till, the day after he was buried. And then we just kept having more and more grandbabies after that.
10 beautiful grandkids, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but there was one in particular that really changed the course of your life, and back in 26 years ago? Sophie?
Yeah,
Sophie?
29 years ago.
29 she is?
29 years
I didn't
ago.
know she was that.
Yes, Sophie. Well, Hanley was our star because God blessed us with her when we needed happiness more than anything. And she was such a good, sweet, precious baby. And they stayed here the first 2 weeks after she was born. So I just really, I couldn't get enough of Hanley. I mean, she was wonderful. I always say I never had enough grieving because she was such a blessing to me. And then we had, who did we have after Hanley? Allison Claire and Anna Catherine came shortly after that. And then we had Sophie, of course, who was born blind. But it worked out great that I didn't have a husband to be worrying about because I could go with, she had most of her surgeries in Los Angeles. And while Will would go, he couldn't stay maybe the 3 weeks or however long we had to stay there. And so, I was able to stay with Allison and not have any trouble here. All of the kids are crazy about Sophie, too, She's just been, but like I said, George, every one of them is just their own little wonderful selves. And then now I have, how many? 3 great-grandkids. So it's like yesterday, Tommy sent me that, will I meet him at Borden's? And now we're, have all these kids. Yeah.
That's great, though. That's part of your legacy, and that's what you leave behind,
Well, it's been a good, long ride. Hadn't seemed long. In fact, I just got old so quickly. I just thought you'd get old gradually, but it's like just all of a sudden in the last 6 months.
Oh, come on.
It is.
Really? Is
Yes.
that what you feel? Because, you look great. You sound great. Your mind's good. Physically, you look great.
I'm slow, though.
Yeah.
Slower.
Well, yeah. But it's hard to tell. And, slow looks deliberate and strategic and looks like,
I don't know
you're
about
still
that.
taking care of yourself.
So, well, thanks to help from the kids, too.
No, you've been blessed with some beautiful kids.
Well,
grandkids.
lucky with, although I have to be careful saying lucky. I was thinking about this morning. One time, a priest was giving a mission at St. George, and Tommy was home. So I cooked lunch and had the missionary eat with us. And so he was asking us about the children, and Tommy said, oh, we have been lucky. We have 4 kids who haven't caused, any trouble, and, we've really been blessed, and, it's the best luck I've ever had. And the missionary, I'll never forget, said, luck? Hell, it wasn't luck. Y'all have been good parents, And it's true. I think Tommy was such a good dad. I was a lot stricter than he was. He was a lot more fun than I was. So, anyway, it was just a good balance of, hopefully, I tried to keep him in line, while he and the kids just played most of. Well, opposite of your parents. I mean, just um, anyway. But it's been, I'm very blessed to have the children I have. So, and very grateful.
You know what I was going to say is it's impressive that you look at your kids and the successful relationships that they have, all four of them, yeah. Tommy, Shannon, Allison, and Julie, and they're still with their, I mean, not that divorce is the end of the world, but they must have learned the value of relationships and work and from you and Tommy. So in other words, y'all, because they are all pretty successful kids.
Well, I think they married good people. I think if you're blessed with a wonderful spouse, and I feel my girls have married just wonderful men, and Kathy is the most patient, kindest, understanding wife I know. She puts up with a lot more from Tommy than I could ever, and she's such a good teacher. But now they bought a big sailboat, so they're sailing, and Tommy is a nut about shooting, competition shooting. So she just lets him do as much shooting on the weekend as she is very patient. She's more patient than I would be. But the girls have all married wonderful men too.
Now, do you have a favorite about when it comes to Robert, Will, and Jim?
I can't
and this might
dare.
Not make the.
I can't
we
dare
can edit
say
it
that.
out if you just tell me which one's your favorite. Huh?
I can't dare say that. Every time it's their birthday or something, when it's just me and them, I'll say, my favorite. But and when they together, they say, I know I'm your favorite. Yeah. But
those are some good guys.
They
treat your daughters really well.
They really are. And like I said, nobody would put up with Tommy doing what he wants to do all the time. So, of course, he's still working.
Yeah.
So, but she's a wonderful wife.
Yeah. How do you think Tommy would have been with all these grandkids? I mean, in retirement.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
He would have just loved these babies. Tommy liked babies, So, and I don't know, I think I'm maternal, but he could not wait to have a grandbaby. Where, I was fine because I was getting one. And I think it's because Julie came when we were later. And, of course, by then she was grown up, a teenager. So.
But with Shannon and Tommy, was he all cuckoo and gaga on the floor?
He really was. Yeah. He really was. And like I said, loved his time in the morning with the children. Yeah. The early morning when my shift hadn't started yet. Yeah. So, anyway, but no, he would just be so nuts about. In fact, when Sophie was born, that's the first thing I thought about. That, gosh, if Tommy could just meet these wonderful kids or have known Hanley. He was he'd even considered buying his own baby seat, but what do they call those carriers? Because he said, I know that if I don't have my own, they won't let me drive with the baby. Yeah. So he was all ready to be a grandfather. And I think a lot of it was because his buddies were all new grandfathers.
Well, you've been a pretty good grandmother.
And now my kids, Tommy's a grandfather, Shannon's a grandmother. It's hard to believe that time just flies that quickly. I just cannot imagine. I think Tommy's 63. How old is Scott? He's Scott's
62, age. 63, 60, something like that, 62. Yeah.
I mean, when your kids are that age, it's just hard to imagine. But that's life, and aren't we lucky we can go all these years?
Yeah. And so, if your kids watch this in a few years or whatever, if they come back, grandkids, what do you want them to remember about Corinne Cook?
Oh, Lord, maybe some of the things they remember, I don't want them to remember.
So what would we like to replace that with? That you tried your best?
I tried what's, and like I said, and yet I always tried to instill faith. That's the main thing. I wish, I want all my kids to just really have emphasis with their family on their faith and pass that on. So, and I'm sure they all do. But I do believe in faith and family, and heavens knows they're better than I am with family. They're very good parents. But no, just keeping together, which they seem to do, and faith and being happy with one another. Yeah. And my kids I'm lucky because they don't get mad at each other. Yeah. Shannon is kind of, well, I always say she was like Julie's mother because there was such a difference in those two. And so Julie goes to her like she's her mother. So maybe I ought to say I need to be like Shannon.
When you grow up?
When I grow up.
I want to be like Shannon. Yeah.
So anyway, but no, it's been a good life. Yeah. I just can't believe it's that many years. Yeah. So
it's been a good one because a lot of people make it to this age and there's wreckage and carnage all behind them.
And so many. But Bill, I remember going with the children, driving to the funeral home when Tommy died, and I told the kids, I said, I don't know how to pray because our life had been good. I didn't have to pray for anything. And Tommy said, and I don't have anything I wished I had said or done. We didn't have any baggage. And so as hard as it was to lose Tommy, there was nothing we wished we had changed or done or wanted to do.
Yeah. He knew he was loved, and and
right.
The kids knew that.
Well, and that when Tommy died Tommy had just bought a house. It was before he and Kathy had married, right before. And every Sunday, people were helping him. His buddies would go and help him paint or haul stuff or whatever. And I was so glad they were helping. I was bringing all this food. It was Meals on Wheels. I'd arrive with baked chicken and potato salad, rice dressing. So I always had a lot of food if they would work with Tommy on the weekend. And right the day before Tommy died, Tommy was in the bathtub fixing the stopper. And little Tommy was sitting on the edge of the tub watching him. And I said, Tommy, you probably can fix that better than your daddy. I said, do you? He said, no, he's doing great. And he just sat where I was just going to hurry up and get it done, faster. And so then we have the big feeding and all that, finished, wrapped up with all the tools. And Tom and I are home and getting ready to go to bed. And he's getting ready to get in the shower, and then he comes back in and starts dressing. I said, well, what's your problem? Because he was getting ready to get right in the shower. And then he comes back. He said, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, and I forgot to get the kids their Valentines. He wouldn't buy them candy anymore because they didn't want candy. They wanted money. If they were 16, they got $16, $20, whatever. So, but he always gave them a cute card. So he said, well, I'm going to buy them a card. I said, oh, goodness. I said, I didn't get them one either. And and he said, and get you a card. I said, oh, and I didn't get you one either. So when he left, I wrote him a note, which I hadn't written a note to Tommy probably since answering the Borden's note on I will go out on Friday. So anyway, Tommy died suddenly, but it was all so finished and slow, So, and then Allison was the only one that wasn't working at Tommy's. So the next morning she called him well, around noon. And Janet, our wonderful secretary that we had the entire time Tommy was in business, said he was walking out the door to go play racquetball. So she said, Tommy, this is Allison. You want to just call her when you get back? And he said, no, let me talk to her. Dropped his bag, got the phone, and he said, well, you were the only one yesterday that wasn't there, but I mailed you Valentine. So even though she wasn't here, she too had it. She had just, and then they called her back in 30 minutes and said he was dead. So he died so fast, but it was so finished. It was, and like I said, since then the kids have just picked up the pieces, and we have had so much laughter and happiness with all these grandkids. So it looks like it's just continuing, and I hope it goes on forever, especially with my kids.
Yeah. And that's one thing I know you hope, you wish, and after you're
Right.
gone, that they still get along, they still get together.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's the life. Fancy or not fancy, that's just how it was.
Amen.
And I don't guess I'd trade any of it. I wished I had done it any other way.